The question that I have for you is, was there a particular time in your life where that crossroad happened, that shift happened from not believing in God to maybe starting to believe in God or doubting atheism?
Oh, absolutely. It's a good way to put it. I started by doubting my disbelief. And the way that happened originally was basically through my career as a scientist, both as a graduate student and later as a professional researcher. As a grad student, I was studying biochemistry, and I had been a chemistry major in college. And to do that, you have to learn a little bit about physics, especially modern physics. And what I was learning about quantum theory and relativity and the uncertainty principle and other things in physics led me to question my very strong belief in materialism, which is basically that everything can be explained eventually by fairly straightforward, simple mathematical equations that describe the material world. And it's the philosophy that everything can be known. If you know the past perfectly, you can predict the future. In fact, modern physics says, no, you cannot do that. That's the essence of the uncertainty principle of Heisenberg, and it also applies to many other things. And then when I began studying biochemistry, the details of how cells work, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, the things that cells do, and I go into some detail on this in my upcoming book, which will be published in August, which is about biology and God. And the details are, I mean, I don't go into too much detail because that would be a little bit inaccessible. But I tried to show, and I hope I do, that kind of complex, it's not just very complex, it's something that there's no easy way, or there's no way to understand how that could have originated from nothing, from just chemicals in the sea. And I say that not as a philosophical idea, but as a scientific one. I mean, scientifically, in fact, I recently published a paper, a scientific paper, mathematically showing that you can't evolve life. Life can evolve once it's started, but you can't get the beginning of life through what we now know as evolution. So how did it possibly start? Nobody knows, and scientifically, and it started, and I believe that God created life as He created the universe and humanity and everything else with an origin. But still, there has to be a scientific answer, even if God did it. He did it. God works through science. Science is the way that we have natural laws. Gravity comes from God. Everything comes from God. So how did life come about? And we don't know, but my guess is that there will be an answer to that, but that answer, like many other answers in science, will point strongly to a divine creator.
Wow. When you're mentioning that, you published a paper mathematically. What would you say to someone? How could you prove that mathematically, that evolution can evolve? Is it through the DNA coding? Is it through?
No, this is actually a very simple thing. And in fact, it's not totally original. A very famous scientist named Manfred Eigen had put this out many, many decades ago with different starting ideas, because it was a long time ago, but came to pretty much the same conclusion. And it has to do with era. It has to do with the fact that when living organisms, all living organisms, reproduce themselves, they do it with almost no error. Tiny, tiny degree of error, which is good because that allows for evolution. But there's no such thing as perfect reproduction, and you need very, very high level of accuracy in reproduction in order for evolution to work. And that's written into the equations on evolution. So all I did was I took those equations and I sort of rearranged them in a way to show that there is a threshold, which is pretty high of accuracy that you have to pass. So how early chemicals could have reproduced themselves with that accuracy is not known. It's probably not possible. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
One of the comments often that we'll get in some of our videos is, well, eventually science will find it out. You give it enough time, kind of evolution of the gaps, so to speak.
Yeah, it can be that, but I also think that that's somewhat true. And in fact, in physics, nobody could understand how light could be at a constant speed. It doesn't matter whether you're running away or going towards it; if the speed
Mm.
is the same, that doesn't make any sense at all. And some people said, "Well, that's too hard, forget it." But Einstein came up with an answer. Now, the interesting thing is that the answer to that, and the answer to a lot of other things in physics, and especially quantum theory, they're scientifically absolutely valid, but they don't make any sense in
Mm.
terms of the way we think of science as being very logical, very sensible. They don't make that kind of sense. It
Mm.
just, there's something called quantum superposition and things that just don't, that we can't understand them. We know they're true, but and a great way to look into this further is to look into the double slit experiment, which describes why electrons or photons, little tiny particles, are both waves and they're particles at the same time, much like Jesus Christ was a man and God at the same time. And when
Wow.
people tell me that doesn't make any sense, I say, yeah, right, just like physics,
Hmm.
because electrons are both fully particle and fully wave at the same time, and they can act as either one or both. So, yeah,
Wow.
science reflects theology very closely, and that
Wow.
was what led me to say, well, gee, wait a minute, maybe this absolute materialism is not the whole story. There must be something else. I don't know what it is. I wasn't ready to believe in Jesus, that's for sure. I'd been
Hmm.
taught Christianity was a terrible evil and certainly not true and just awful. And for those who haven't heard me before or read any books, I grew up in a very strong atheist, also communist family. And so religion was the root of all evil. you know?
Wow.
So I dropped that view and I became sort of an agnostic. I just didn't know, and I didn't think about it much, like many
Hmm.
of the nuns today.
Hmm.
Religion, I don't know. I'm too busy. Don't bother me.
Hmm.
And that's where I was for quite some time. And I might have stayed there. I might be there now, except that the Holy Spirit had mercy on me and dragged me over.